Welcome to Suburban Warrior, the podcast that will impact, inspire, and empower you to transform your mindset and become the badass warrior that you are. I'm your host and fellow warrior, Chrissy Pfeiffer, former clinician and corporate marketing exec turned multi-passionate entrepreneur, performance and life coach, and mom to 4 not-so-little warriors. Each week, I will bring you honest conversations with inspiring guests to share their stories of resilience, optimism, success, and simple yet effective strategies so that you transform your thoughts and change your behavior to get the results you want in your life. You will be empowered to take action, warrior up, and believe in you. Let's do this. Hey, warriors. Welcome back to Suburban Warrior Podcast. I'm your host, Chrissy Pfeiffer. And once again, I am joined by another amazing suburban warrior. But before I introduce her, I just want to express my gratitude that you are all here listening each week and feeling connected to these warrior stories and taking a little piece of information or inspiration and using it to transform something in your own life. This podcast is all about connection and really tapping into your own authentic personal power through stories. So today I have with me Rachel Ballard. And Rachel is a real world, tell it like it is, marriage strategist and creator of the How to Like Your Husband podcast. Through her authentic and inspiring marriage content, supportive Facebook community, and hilariously funny yet motivating podcast, she cultivates authentic, heart-centered, and actionable strategies for women all over the world to start to start liking their husbands more. Because sometimes it ain't easy. And boy, don't we all know that. So welcome, Rachel.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to have you on the show today because, I feel like it was a little bit of fate that connected us through, another Facebook group that we're both a part of. Mm-hmm. And, I saw you on there and I think it was a post or a comment and saw that you had this podcast and I love the title. How to Like Your Husband, because it is pretty original.
Draws people in for sure. For sure.
Yeah, it really does. Because, basically, I think it's a topic that we all want to talk about, right? It's like kind of like this topic that's off limits with women that we don't really talk about. I mean, it's easy to bitch and complain about our husbands, but, when we really want to get to the nitty gritty or talk about some real life stuff that's going on, really good or bad, it's just not really the topic of conversation that we're bringing up. It's not top of mind. So not only do I love that you're doing this podcast, but I love that you're doing it in such a way that, makes it feel real and easy, to say, okay, listen, we're all kind of going through this, right? If you're married, no marriage is ever perfect. Nope. Every marriage takes work. And, we all go through times that are great and sometimes that are not so great. And the only way to get through it is to talk about it. And that's what you're doing. So thank you for doing that. I think it's amazing.
No problem. Yeah. It's hard sometimes for people to admit, but the reality is all of us have at some point or another not liked our husband. Like you just cannot be with a person for that long, day in and day out, and like them all the time. We may love them through all of it. Like is a completely different story. I mean, it's kind of like saying that we like our children all the time, or we like our parents all the time, or our siblings all the time. Sometimes you just don't like those people because they do things that don't resonate with you or don't make you feel good. And what are you going to do? You got to get over it. You got to move on and you got to create what you want. So that's what we're trying to do here.
Exactly. I love that. And to your point, you love them and you would do anything for them in your life. Absolutely. But sometimes it's not always easy to like them. And so, okay, so tell me give me a little bit about your background and your story and how you got into, this podcast, but also being a marriage strategist and creating this community for women.
Sure. I found myself in a position several years ago where I did not like my husband at all. Like day in, day out, just he was not a person that I chose to spend time with anymore. We had just fallen out of the habit of spending time together through having kids. So we have his, mine, and ours kids. We've been together for 14 or 15 years. And so we have two boys that are one's in college and one's a senior in high school. And then we have two girls together that are 11 and 8. And we got through, little kid stage and found that we weren't friends but that we were really, really great logistical partners. Like, we do that really well. We get kids everywhere they're supposed to be. We feed them. We make sure they have all the things for all the birthday parties and all this stuff. And we can do that super well. We also run a business together, and we do that really well. So business partnerships, logistical partnerships, we had that in the bag. And we were having a conversation with friends that involved talking about that our boys were going to be leaving for school in the next few years. And the conversation turned to, if we hadn't had the girls together, we would be empty nesters before we were 40 or before I was 40. And what would we do then with all of our time, kind of thing? And that's kind of when it really hit me that I would leave. That's what I would do, because I didn't have anything there. And that was just the honesty of it. I wasn't leaving because of my kids, because I'd already been divorced and shared a kid with someone else. And I hated that. I hated having to share my children or my child. And I did not want to have to share my girls. And I wasn't being treated badly. Like, there was no reason that I had to go. So in my mind, it was like, okay, well, we've got about 12 years before the last one leaves. So I can either spend that time creating the marriage that I want and having that when she goes, or I can just spend that with my head down, getting through, and then make my life after. And that didn't seem to make sense to me. I figured, what do I have to lose over the next 12 years of trying that, why not? So I did that. I just worked really, really hard on myself, figuring out what I even wanted, who I even was. I really feel like I was like runaway bride type of thing, where I didn't even know what kind of eggs I really liked, because I had gone from my parents' house to my first husband's house. And then we got divorced and I had an apartment for a time. But even in that time, I was so focused on my son that I never really figured out who I was and what I liked and what was good for me. And so I focused on myself, and in doing that, it created a lot of change in my relationship. And my husband was very intrigued by it. He was very put off by it in the beginning. He did not like it. He was like, what is happening here? Who are you trying to be? This seems fake. All the negative things you could think of. And then by the time, we were like 2 or 3 years into it, he was like, this is intriguing. I think I want to do this too. And, decided to kind of come along in that journey with me. And we were able to.
So the journey that you're talking about was sort of like a journey of like self-discovery.
Yeah, exactly. I think the mistake that a lot of us make as women, that I made for years and years and years, was that everything, if they would just change, if my husband would just do this, then I'll be happy. If he would stop drinking, if he would call me before he spends money, if he would put the kids to bed at night for me, if he would remember to buy me a present on Valentine's Day, whatever, we have all these excuses. If they would just do this, then we would be happy. And we forget that we have the ability to make ourselves happy. And that it's not really their job to make us happy. Like, we need to have that on our own, or they can't do it.
Or no marriage is ever going to work.
Right.
And I couldn't agree more. I think, well, first of all, going back to your comment about being logistical partners, I think that happens with,
I think it happens all the time.
And Yeah, all the time. I mean, anytime you have kids and multiple kids that are, I mean, it really doesn't even matter what stage of life that they're in, except for
Right.
when they're off at college, because every single phase of life, from toddler to grade school, middle school, high school, and then off to college, you are juggling and you're logistical partners.
Right.
And it's a pain and it's hard. And if you don't find the time to connect, and then you can lose that relationship that you had in the beginning, and
Absolutely.
so much time can go by and you forget like what the beginning was all about because
Right. Why
it's
you
like a
liked them
distant
in the
memory.
first place. Right. It's so
Yes.
far away. And there's so much hurt and bitterness that can build up in between there. And you can just get so far that you don't know how to turn around and go back. And that was what
Yeah.
I was terrified of, is like, have we passed the point of no return? And I didn't feel like we had. I felt like there was a way back to it. We just needed to figure out what it was. And that I couldn't figure out what the way was for us until I figured out who I even was. So,
Yeah.
um,
That's awesome. And that's really powerful that you recognize that and were able to do that. So, okay. So you recognize that and then you began your journey of self discovery.
mhm.
And through that, what did you find out?
Well, I found out that I'm kind of awesome. Like,
I love
I
that.
was
Yeah.
like, huh, what do you know? Like, people like me, and I have a lot of great friends, and I am a great friend, and I'm a good mom, and um, if I can be good at all these things, I could probably be a good wife too, if I would just like change the approach that I was using. But also that everything in my life was better when I took care of myself, which I know is a big theme that we all hear right now: self care, self care, self care. Everybody wants to push it at us. Um, I think that there's, limitations to that for a lot of women, and a lot of us think of that as money that we have to spend on ourselves. But really, what I found is that when I just got up a little earlier and took time to make sure that I got to do something I enjoyed every day, um, it made my whole day better. It made everybody happier. And why not? That's free.
Yes.
Like, you can get up early
Why
for free.
not?
You can read a book for free. You can go run outside for free. Um,
And
so
you can get out of bed. I mean, you
yeah,
can.
you
You can
can. You
create a
can get out
new
of bed.
you can do it. You can create a new daily habit that gets you out of bed, whether it's a half hour or an hour earlier before the insanity begins,
Yeah.
and take it just for yourself. I'm a huge proponent of that because I do that for myself as well. And it changed my life
Yeah.
significantly when I realized that.
If you get woke up by a child, your day is over. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
you're
just like
pissed. You're
you are
just so
like,
angry.
okay, now my entire day is going to be dictated to me by the needs of the people around me. And so I just quit letting that happen to myself. So where I was in charge of my day, and by the time my kids get up, I feel like I've had a whole day. I feel like I've like got to do all the things that I wanted to do. And so I get to show up better for them. And my husband gets up really early as well for work. So we actually get to connect before he even leaves for work. And it's almost like we get these little mini dates in the morning. We get 20 minutes to just like talk about the day, or, what the plan is, or just sit on the couch and both read our book or whatever. And have that point of connection, like even physical connection, to just set us up for success in the day. I like him a lot better when I've touched him in the morning, gotten to hug him by and all those things, than when he calls me about something that's going wrong at our business at 8:30 in the morning, pissed. I can be a lot more pleasant when I've already like had the love part, and then I can move
Yeah.
into the business part a lot smoother. So
So, okay. So tell me how you got to the point. So, because I would think that a lot of women listening, could possibly be in that place thinking like, oh my God, like my life is very logistical with my husband,
yeah,
and I'm, not feeling that connected. I love him, but some days I really don't like him.
Yeah.
And, maybe, so if you've gone through that process of self-discovery though, how did you then translate you feeling happier with who you are into your marriage?
Honestly, it's a very organic thing that happens. And what I see with my clients and with myself is that if you are focusing on yourself, your husband, I would say 98% of husbands want to take care of you. That is the biological, the chemical makeup of their body is that they want to take care of us. And so when we're taking care of ourselves and they can see the positive changes in us. I mean, for me, my husband could see how much happier I was when I got to go out for a run. And we got to where, at this point now, he'll just joke. If I'm stressed in the house, he'll just say, oh, why don't you go for a run? Or, why don't you go work out for a minute? Have you got your workout in today? Because he knows like that is like my therapy. I mean, I even have a shirt that says I run to burn the crazy off. So
Yeah.
like that is what I do. That's what I do for myself. So like organically, it's just that when we are taking care of ourselves, it makes it easier for them to take care of us and to feel like they're taking care of us. Additionally, as I was able to realize who I was and what I wanted, I was able to communicate that to him. And, the number one thing in my Facebook group, the how to like your husband group, when you come into that community, I ask you a few questions, right? To just make sure that you're a woman, you're married, like that that we can keep a really safe space for everybody to be able to talk about all their concerns and things going on in their marriages. And I want you to feel safe there. So I ask these questions and make sure that we keep that a tight knit space. But one of the questions I ask is, what is your biggest marriage struggle? And I ask that so that I know what I need to be talking about on my podcasts. And I will tell you that 95% of the time, 95%, I've done the math, communication is the answer that I get.
Wow.
And there's some version of communication. And if it's not communication, I can assure you it involves time.
Yeah.
And
sure.
those are the answers, so when you know yourself, when you've been on a self-discovery journey, when you figure out what kind of eggs you like to eat, not to keep going back to Runaway Bride here, but when you figure that out, you can communicate that to somebody else because you feel confident in it. You feel worthy of saying it. And you're also excited to hear the same thing about them. So for me, I was able to say, hey, this is what I need to be successful. This is what I need to feel calm in our house. This is what I need to be able to be vulnerable with you. Vulnerable is a very hard muscle for me. It's a very tight muscle that I have had to stretch and stretch and stretch over the past few years. And I have to exercise that muscle every day to be able to be vulnerable with my husband. And to feel safe doing that, I had to be able to communicate. So in order to communicate, you have to know what you actually like and what you actually want and need and all of those things. So once you figure that out, then the talking about it happens. But I really do. I even have an episode about this, that you can fix your marriage without even talking to your husband about it. Because really figuring yourself out and starting to say things that give him those clues as to how to take care of you can change the dynamic between you if he feels like he can take care of you.
Yeah, I mean, and that makes so much sense. And I completely understand that about it happening organically once you are closer to who you are and what your wants and needs are, and then being able to communicate them. And I also think that, obviously communication is huge in any relationship, but, without communicating in your marriage, you feel so disconnected or, I know if my husband's even just traveling for work for a couple of days, I miss him and I feel so disconnected because we haven't even talked about the little stuff, not even like, real vulnerable, getting deep stuff, but you haven't even connected at all. So I think communication is so important. And to your point about really like making things or creating change without even telling them, it's also, don't you think it's also in how you communicate to them? Like, not just what your needs are, but like when they do something that upsets you, or they're doing something and you're frustrated and you're just looking at them and you're just so pissed off, and they're really not doing anything to piss you off. You're
Right.
just so annoyed with them. But
Yeah.
like, if you can just like shift your perspective in that moment, you know, and just really think, okay, they're not doing that to piss me off. They're just doing that because that's a habit of theirs.
Right.
And understanding how then to communicate instead of like jumping down their throat or saying something harsh or rude, communicating in a way and being like, you know what, that's really annoying.
Yeah.
Or like, I don't know, saying it in a nicer way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think too, just like always leading from a place of grace for me. Like I realized that I was constantly like everything he would do, I just assumed he was doing to piss me off, like
Yeah.
or just or to irritate me or to let me down, and I was like, and then he was reacting to me in the same way. Like everything I would say, he would, bite my head off, like I was trying to be hateful or angry at him or whatever. And I'm just like, why are you treating me like I don't want what's best for you? And then I'm kind of like, oh, that's exactly what I'm doing to you. Like that's the same thing that I'm doing. And so just really um concentrating and focusing on thinking and reminding myself constantly that everything he does is from a place of love. Everything he
Yeah.
does is from a place of love. And I just have had to like teach myself to think that and think it a few times before I react to whatever it is and decide like, is it even worth it? I mean, that's a huge thing. Like, is this even really worth the argument? Like, is his socks like right there? Is it easier to have the argument or is it easier to just pick up the socks and put them in the hamper? Like, if you just put them in the hamper and then go about your day, then you can be done with that and you can have a great day and nice night and like all the things. But you're going to bitch
Absolutely.
about the socks, then you're going to start a whole can of worms that you don't even have time for. Like, do you even have time for that argument today? You probably don't. So
Yeah, no one
just pick up the
does. No one
socks,
does. But yet somehow, yeah, but somehow we always seem to get in these little arguments and about silly things. And
Yeah.
I love that too, because I take, I always, my mantra is with a lot of relationships, not just with my husband, but with anyone that might seem frustrating or doing something that is upsetting. I just try to
Right.
assume good intent. Their intent is not to upset me. They're not out to be evil. It's not
Right.
about me. And a lot of times with our husbands, it's the same thing. It's not about
It's
us,
not, but you know
you
what? It's
know?
way easier. And I don't know why this is, but it is way easier for us to give that grace to the barista at Starbucks than it is to give that
Yes.
grace to our husband. Like if I have a waitress with a bad day, it's very easy for me to be like, oh, I wonder what's going on in her life and just, not think it's me. But if my husband does the same thing, like, am I giving him the same grace? Probably not. Like
Yeah.
most of the time.
Absolutely. Okay,
So
so communication
mhm.
is key and it's top, and that makes a ton of sense. I think that's a huge topic, and I think we could spend an entire podcast just talking about that because,
Oh yeah, or 10.
there's
Yeah.
so much about communication.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's everything really. And it's hard. And it's hard. And like you said, vulnerability, connection, it takes a lot and it takes
Yeah.
work. But what's something else? What is another strategy or tactic that if someone is listening and feels like, okay, that's me, I'm in that place in my marriage
Yeah.
where, it's one way or another at this point, or I'm not feeling it, or
Right.
what is another piece of advice you could give to them?
So for the biggest thing that I always say is that you have to find ways to remember why you like him, why you liked him to begin with. You can't go back to 10 or 15 years ago, 2 years ago. You can't go back to that time before kids and before financial issues and aging parents and like there's no rewind button to that, but you can get back to some of those core values and core like connection points that you guys had at that time. And so for us, it's really important that we have things we enjoy doing together. and that we do those regularly. So the number one thing in our house, the biggest priority every Sunday when we have our Sunday meeting to plan out the week, the first thing that goes on the calendar is date night. And if there is not room for date night, something else will be moved to make room for date night. Because if we are not connecting, then we cannot teach our children how to have a strong marriage. We cannot parent them the way that they deserve to be parented. And so we have before canceled gymnastics practice or, play dates or whatever they are, to make room for time for us to go out by ourselves and connect in some way. And I think that we use a lot of excuses, we as women especially, use a lot of excuses around date night on why that won't work for us. We cannot have a weekly date night. I hear this constantly. Let me tell you something. Unless you have a baby that is like nursing and up all night and all those things still, you can have a weekly date night. You may not get to leave your house for it, but you can have a date night. You just have to change your mindset around what that date looks like. So we have had dates, we've had lunch dates where kids are at school and I go meet him for lunch and we do that. We have had early morning dates. Like if we know we're not having a hard time fitting it in that week or sick kids or whatever, we'll get up early together and find some, play some board games at home or whatever while our kids are still sleeping. Or we go on hikes a lot together. That's completely free. Like there's no money involved in that. We've even taken a board game to Starbucks and just sat there and had a hot tea and played games. You can do a lot of things. Even if your kids are like probably 5 and up, go walk around the block and just peek your head in, peek your head in every time you go around and, set them up in front of the TV if you have to and find time to connect. And the other part of that is be willing to lose sleep for your marriage. Like, I know we're tired. We're all so freaking tired. I get it. I'm tired too. I assure you. But if I have to choose between 20 minutes of extra sleep or staying up to connect with my husband after the kids go to bed, I'm going to choose him.
Yeah.
Because connecting with him and having a strong marriage gives me more energy than 20 minutes of sleep, for sure.
Yeah. That's a great point, because I think that's a big excuse for a lot of people is I'm so tired.
I'm so tired. It's tired. It's the money. Yeah. Time.
Absolutely.
Money. Yeah. And you don't need money to have a date. You don't need extra time. You just have to use your time differently. Another good, I think, tip for this is if you're sitting at practice anyway, right? Like you're sitting there, your kid is out on the field, that can be a date. Have him come with you, walk around the field, hold hands, talk, like bring a picnic lunch or dinner, whatever, like find time to fit it in because it is super important. And once you do find ways to fit that in, you'll find that those ways are popping up all over the place. And now, I feel like we get about 5 dates a week because it'll just, some little time will pop up and we'll just fit something in that's just us and we dig it. So
that's awesome. And I think that's great advice because I do agree that no matter how busy your life is or how tired you are, there is time. If you plan it out and you prioritize it, there is time to find that connection that is oh so important. Okay, so one more thing. So communication, finding the time for date nights so that you actually can communicate.
Right.
What about people that might be struggling physically with their marriage? Like they're not feeling connected physically, right? Sometimes it's a lot easy to talk about it or start the conversation. But if they're struggling with, wanting to have sex or they're not having sex or whatever, how to rekindle it?
Sure.
Rekindle that flame, that passion.
Yeah. And that is a hard one. As a reminder to all of you, I work with women, just women. So I don't counsel couples. So I'm here to tell you how, very straightforwardly, as a woman, how I think you can fix your marriage. And sometimes you're not going to like what that sounds like. But so for us as women, we like to have that feel connected emotionally in order to be intimate physically. And our men are exactly the opposite. So they want that physical intimacy in order to feel connected emotionally. So the bottom line is, if you want your husband to be connecting with you emotionally, then you need to be having sex with him, and you need to be being intimate with him. And that might mean that you just have to kind of turn your brain off to the fact that you're not as connected emotionally right now as you would like to be, and just do it. Like, make it a to-do list item on your day. And I recommend starting this with texts. Honestly, I think texts are really convenient for us. It's very easy, and that it can start some romance and spice things up. So I actually even have 50 free texts that you can get on my website, and download them. And they start with really easy and like really
mild,
clean, very, very clean version, very mild version. And then we work our way up in, hotness level and word usage. Make sure you delete them off your phone right after you send them, so your kids don't end up seeing them. But that's a thing I recommend. But if you take a few minutes and set up some alarms in your phone, your phone is your best friend in your marriage. I really believe that, because you can set up alarms and you can tell them what to tell you. So I have alarms that go off that say love language, and it reminds me that, hey, it's 5:00. Mike is home at 5:00, and I need to make sure that I've spoke his love language tonight. I have texts that go off at 10:30 in the morning on certain days of the week that say text, and that remind me to send him a dirty little text to make sure he knows that I am thinking about him in a way that he wants me to be thinking about him. And I have these alarms not only for him and for our marriage, but for stuff with our kids too. I have kids with different love languages than mine. I have to remember to speak those and be reminded. So I'll set up reminders for myself with that to just make sure I'm connecting with everybody. So, but back to the text, send a text. Like, seriously, if you are making dinner and he is helping a kid with their math homework, and you send him a little text that lets him know what you would like him to do after the kids go to bed, I can assure you that the intimacy in your relationship is going to skyrocket. It's gonna
skyrocket.
Exactly. You are going to get something positive out of that. And I like to think that most of us, I understand there's scars and things, that there's extenuating circumstances, but that most of us, we may not want to do it right when they want to do it. And we may not be as into it as they are. But once you get started, I mean, it's fun for everybody. Like, you're going to be happy. You're going to be happy when it's over, or I hope you're happy when it's over. And so if you get
if you're started, not, that's a whole other issue.
That's a whole different episode. I don't, that's something different. Exactly. I can connect you with somebody for that. But, honestly, like, send a text, do it a couple days in a row, and like, make sure he knows that you're thinking about him. And then I do even like set texts to remind me, like, when the kids go to bed, like, this is an item on my to-do list. I am going to initiate sex tonight. I am going to make sure that it happens. And when you give him that, he is able to give you back what you need. He's able to connect with you emotionally and feel closer to you and more intimate with you and playful with you and all of those things. So, text your husband something good and dirty. That
is so great. I love that advice, because it's something that can be, first of all, you can do it really at any time.
Anytime. Yeah.
Anytime. It's simple. It's easy. And for people, to your point, that maybe aren't connecting or talking, it's actually a great way to start, right?
It really is.
You're not face to face. And so you don't have to say something to his face and see how it lands.
Right. Exactly. You don't.
Literally. That's awesome.
Yeah, he has time. When you've gotten to the point where it's now no longer like a little puddle between you guys, it's now like the Grand Canyon between you, like, getting back from that can seem impossible. But if you send a text in the middle of the day when he's at work, like, he has time to think through, like, what the hell just happened to my wife? Did she send this to the right person? Right. Like, whatever. And it can just really break the barrier, break that ice, and help you like inch back to where you're trying to get. Because I mean, think about it, like when you guys first met, depending on how long ago that was, maybe you weren't waiting on text, but you were waiting on that call. You just couldn't wait until he called you again. And you would hang on the phone all night long. You know, you hang up first. No, you hang up first. No, you hang up. Like, come on. I'm not the only one.
All been there. All been there for sure.
So
Yeah.
just, try and remember that feeling and act like that girl. But while still being true to yourself, you can have that fun, playful you that was around 20 years ago and still be true to the woman that you are today.
Yeah. I think that is such a great point. And I love the analogy that you used about the little puddle or the Grand Canyon, because, just in some of my coaching with my clients, I do feel like with relationships, when it comes, to relationships, they feel like if it is like a Grand Canyon, they feel like there's no hope, right?
Yeah,
or they feel like,
impossible.
yeah, it seems impossible, because it does seem like it maybe it's been years of not a great relationship. But at some point, somebody has to take the first step,
Yep.
right? And somebody has to switch up their mindset, and it's like the chicken or the egg. Who's going to do it first,
Yeah.
right?
And
And
I really
and
I live by this, like, we're the mom, like, you're the woman, you're the mom, like, put your big girl pants on and make your family what you want your family to be. And if you want your family to know what a healthy marriage looks like, if you want to be happily married, if you want true love and respect from your partner, you know how to get that. Like, and it's on you as the woman to do it, because that's who I'm speaking to. And there's probably somebody else out there who would tell your husband the same thing. I'm happy for them, but in the meantime, you can only change yourself. So do that and create what you
right.
want out of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And obviously, all of the advice and everything that we're talking about today is for those people that are in, a healthy
Healthy.
partnership
Yep.
with respect. We're not talking, of course, there are
Absolutely.
situations that are extenuating circumstances that are
For
extremely
sure.
unhealthy marriages where there's maybe abuse and that sort of thing. We're not talking about that. We're talking about
Nope.
if you're in a relationship, but you just feel disconnected. There's distance there, and it's happened over time. And like you said, you're maybe in love with them, but not liking them. And it's
Right.
about getting back to that place of they are your best friend, liking them, and enjoying who you're with every day.
Yeah, I think that a mistake that a lot of us make, and I say this as a person that has been divorced, so I'm not calling anybody out on a mistake that I haven't made myself, is that we tend to forget um, the why from the beginning, and then we fail in a relationship, and we feel like we can't go back, or that it's too hard to get back past that canyon, and so it's easier to just give that up and go find something that's new and fresh. And the honest part of that is the new and fresh, it'll have a canyon eventually. Like, it's the same
Oh my
process
gosh.
will happen if you don't change what you're doing. So it's either going to be hard then, or it can be hard now, and you can get past it and move on. Again, only if you're in a healthy, loving relationship. So
I absolutely love that. I love that you have to go back to your why. I'm a huge fan of knowing your why and your personal why and the why of your relationship and the why of
yeah.
why you're in the career that you're in and all of that. So I think that is absolutely awesome advice for all of our listeners. So Rachel, thank you so much for being here today. I really do feel like we could have some really a lot more fun conversations in the
Yeah,
future. So um,
absolutely.
thank you for being here. Can you tell my listeners where they can find you? I think your website's rachelballard.com, right?
It's mrsrachelballard.com.
There we go.
Yes. And my
Okay.
podcast is How to Like Your Husband. You can find that anywhere that you like to listen to podcasts. And then I am on Instagram at Mrs. Rachel Ballard. And
And your Facebook group.
Yeah, the
right?
biggest place, like we have a lot of good conversation at How to Like Your Husband private Facebook group. Lots of fun things going on over there and constant conversation. It's a positive place to bring issues where people will actually like give you advice. We are not a husband bashing group. It's like genuinely a place for growth. So it's a really
Yes.
comfy
A
place to be.
positive, safe space to
Yeah.
communicate.
Yeah. I
Awesome.
love it there. So
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you so much. And everybody, thank you so much for joining us again on Suburban Warrior. Rachel, you're amazing. Check her out on Facebook and Instagram. You can find me on Instagram at Suburban Warrior, at ChrissyPiper.com. And please, if you loved listening to this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Rachel and I would love to hear your feedback. You can always like tag us on your Insta stories and give us a comment so we can give you more of the information you want to hear about. So
yeah.
thank you so much, everybody. Have an awesome day.